Hey, howdy, hey, and welcome back to Regenerative Farming News. I'm your host, Heather Heinrichs, a former journalist turned farmer and passionate advocate for regenerative farming. I am so excited about this week's episode. I've got a great interview for you with Kelly Sidoryk, a certified holistic management educator with Holistic Management Canada. There is a wealth of knowledge and support for any farmer or rancher who wants to make changes on their farm toward regenerative or holistic practices. And Kelly's story about how her father went against the grain by taking valuable crop acres and putting them into annual pasture grasses was considered crazy at the time. But he knew what he wanted on his farm, and now, almost 40 years later, the farm is flourishing as Kelly and her siblings prepare to hand it down to the next generation. There is real proof in this pudding, and I was so fascinated to hear Kelly talking about how they move their cattle and the challenges they faced. Regenerative farming is not problem-free, but it's proving profitable long-term. The Sidoryk farm is a great example that your farm can be what you want it to be. But before we get to that, let's take a look at the harvest news and discuss the impact of chemical yield-chasing farming on the nutritional value of the food being produced. The 2025 harvest is moving along, slower in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, while Alberta is closing in on the finish line. Saskatchewan sits at 59% complete, still behind the 5-year average of 74%, with rains slowing progress. Alberta, on the other hand, is racing ahead at 78% finished as of September 23rd, well above both the 5- and 10-year averages. Overall, it's wet fields holding Prairie's farmers back in the east, while Alberta enjoys one of the fastest harvest paces in years. On a more personal note, my Monday to Friday job takes me all over the northern areas of Saskatchewan, and I was happy to notice some canola fields that appeared to be underseeded to a winter crop that was just coming up green and covering the soil after harvest. A great example of employing the strategy of keeping a living root in the soil as long as possible, and also protecting the soil from exposure to the sun. Something that really makes regenerative practices work across the board for any farmer anywhere is that you don't have to be locked into strict rules like, for example, organic farming. Getting rid of the chemicals is ideal, and many farmers have done that with regenerative farming. But even just using one or two of the principles can have huge positive impacts. Take cover crops, for example. They build healthier soils. And when the soil is healthier, the food grown in it carries more of the nutrients our bodies need. It's a win-win all around. Farmers see stronger bottom lines, soils gain resilience, and consumers get food that truly nourishes. Before we get to the interview this week, I want to take some time to talk about the decline in nutritional values in our food and how regenerative farming is the solution. Just last week, I was at a restaurant where I ordered a vegetable side of carrots. Out from the kitchen came a nice little bowl of carrot slices. At least, that's what they looked like. But when I tasted one, it could not have been more flavorless. It was like eating a nicely cooked round piece of almost nothing. Most people know how much better food tastes when it comes from your own garden versus the grocery store. Usually, there is a stark contrast, and that's not just because it's the mentality of knowing you grew the food. When food is grown from a healthy soil with a thriving soil ecosystem, that nutrition translates into flavor. There's a growing concern that the food we're producing today isn't as nutritious as it was just a few generations ago. It's just common sense that if we pour the chemical fertilizers onto the land to increase the crops, those fertilizers are fake food. They're not real nutrition for the plants. They are a substitute, and they block the plant's ability to interact with the soil microorganisms like they should be. If a plant is spoon-fed nitrogen, then it has no need for the natural biological processes of obtaining that nitrogen. The more chemicals we use on the land, the more we are killing the microbiology that should be feeding the crops and ultimately sustaining us, humans. A 2024 review put it bluntly, quote, "There is an alarming decline in the nutritional quality of foods over the last 6 decades, particularly in fruits, vegetables, and cereals," end quote. Researchers point to causes like heavy reliance on synthetic fertilizers, the push for high-yielding crops, and soil degradation. This comes from a research paper titled, "An Alarming Decline in the Nutritional Quality of Foods, the Biggest Challenge for Future Generations' Health," by R.L. Bardwaj et al., was published in March 14, 2024 in the journal Foods. Another team explained the so-called dilution effect this way, quote, "As crop yields increase, concentrations of minerals and vitamins often decline, resulting in less nutrient-dense food," end quote. And they warn that it's not just about calories, it's about losing the micronutrients and phytochemicals that keep people healthy. Over the last 50 to 70 years, studies have shown measurable decreases in proteins, minerals, vitamins, and micronutrients in fruits, vegetables, grains, and other staple crops. One long-term analysis comparing data across decades found declines in protein, iron, vitamin C, calcium, and more. Other reviews found minerals like magnesium, copper, and zinc had dropped significantly in many fruits and vegetables, sometimes by 20 to 80% depending on the crop. Scientists often call this the dilution effect. As yields have gone up, thanks to new genetics, fertilizer, and management practices, nutrient concentrations have suffered. Sure, we're growing more food, but the food is less nutritious. We're really not gaining. What's behind this decline? There are a few main culprits. Soil depletion from decades of intensive monocropping and tillage, breeding for yield instead of nutrient density, fertility programs that load up on nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, but overlook trace minerals and organic matter, higher carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which some studies suggest can reduce concentrations of protein, iron, and zinc in cereal grains and legumes. And finally, the shift away from traditional nutrient-rich crop varieties in favor of uniform, market-driven monocrops. For farmers, the big takeaway is that yield is not the only measure of success. A field that produces lots of grain but weaker nutrition is still leaving consumers shortchanged. And remember, farmers are consumers too. We are all connected to the health of the soil. Soil health, crop diversity, and natural biological fertility management are critical levers for producing food that not only fills stomachs but also nourishes bodies. Of course, we can't forget that farming is a business, and typically more yield equals more money. Farming is hard work, and farmers deserve to get rewarded for it. But when farmers are on this podcast telling me week in and week out that they have improved their financial standing by using regenerative principles and cutting back on their inputs, it proves that there's no barriers keeping farmers stuck on the input treadmill, except for the courage to step off of it. For the health of generations to come, we must stop looking for things to kill in the fields and look for ways to bring more life. Our food should burst with flavor. That should be the norm. And the great thing about this is that it can be highly profitable. And I'm often told by farmers who use these principles that it's also a less stressful way to farm. Chemical companies make a lot of money selling their products by telling the farmer it'll bring the biggest yield. But if we can wean our soils off of the chemicals and give the natural systems what it needs, we can grow crops that are more net profitable and are more nutritious for us to eat. We should be eating food grown from land where cows or goats or sheep are manuring all over the soil and where old crop residue is protecting the microorganisms from the harsh rays of the sun. Plants need the sun to grow, but the bacteria in the soil needs the plants to protect them from being baked to death. Desertification is real, and it's happening all over the world, including here in Canada, and it's robbing our food of the nutrition it should have. The common thread across these studies is clear. When farming focuses narrowly on yield with chemical inputs, the nutrient pipeline from soil to crop to human weakens. Rebuilding soil health, adding diversity, and managing fertility more holistically are some of the ways to bring that nutrition back. Next week, we will dive into the importance of diversity. But for now, let's get on to the interview of the week. My guest this week is someone who brings a wealth of experience and perspective to the table. Kelly Sidoryk ranches with her family near Lloydminster, right on the Saskatchewan-Alberta border. Over 35 years ago, Kelly and her family were introduced to holistic resource management, as it was known at the time. A decision-making and planning process that focuses on the connection between finances, land, and people. Kelly went on to complete the certification program with a special focus on the people side of holistic management. Alongside running her own ranching business, she's worked closely with many farm families as they navigate the challenges of transitioning their operations to the next generation. She also teaches holistic management, whole farm ranch planning courses, and is a certified educator with Holistic Management International, where she recently served as board chair. Kelly is passionate about helping producers build businesses and family legacies that are resilient, not just ecologically and financially, but socially as well. And today, I am excited to share her insights with you. Hi, Kelly. Welcome to the podcast. I am so excited to have you to talk to my listeners about your experience and where you come from. So why don't you just give us a little overview of yourself, of who you are, what you do, and where you're located?
Okay, perfect. First off, I'm going to thank you for inviting me to be on your podcast, Heather. I really appreciate it and always enjoy sharing stories and conversations. So we are a family ranching operation located near Lloydminster. So we're halfway in between Edmonton and Saskatoon and very close to the Saskatchewan border. We also have another location further east into Saskatchewan, just northeast of Spiritwood. So I was very fortunate to grow up in the livestock industry, and my parents had an intensive livestock operation that was never really intended to be a family operation as far as the succession piece goes. But a few unusual things fell into place, and we found ourselves at a spot where both my brother and I had come back to work in the operation. At that point in time, which was the late 80s, my parents were finding a lot of different challenges in many ways in what they were working on. And we happened upon a philosophy, if you will, known at that time as holistic resource management. And my dad traveled down into the States to learn more about it. At that time, I was working in Calgary for a livestock magazine. And I was personally always very interested in what we would now call leadership and personal growth. But I always found that that was on a separate pathway from my ag production work and my salary job. So when we first started delving more into it, what really intrigued us was the working with the cattle, working with the land, improving our grass production.
Mm.
And then, so there was the land and the livestock component. Then there was also the financial component, which we knew that that was an integral part of it. We've been paying attention to that. But the third component of it that was interconnected was the people side. That was really an epiphany for me. And because I wanted to have all those integrated, if you will. So anyway, came home and we shifted our operation and really became forage-based livestock with an extensive or slash intensive, depending how you look at it, grazing operation. And so did that with my brother and parents for a number of years, and then our families had started joining the operation and switching it up. At the same time, I was very fortunate to be pursuing more learning in holistic management and have been able to spend, I'm a certified educator with Holistic Management International, and I also do some coaching and consulting with farm families in the areas of succession planning, goal setting, financial planning, grazing planning, all of those different pieces. So I'm really fortunate that my situation allows me to pursue some passions that I have.
Absolutely. That sounds fantastic. So, can you give me a bit of a picture of what were your practices before you learned about the holistic slash regenerative? I think most people are kind of calling it regenerative more nowadays. What was it like before you did these practices, and what did you change, and what were the results of that?
Um, in our operation, which was a feedlot operation, we we were already doing things that were at that point in time, I think we would have considered them. We didn't necessarily call it regenerative. Sustainable might have been the piece, but where the manure that was being produced was being put back on the land to grow the feed. But it was more intensive and the inputs were high. And so when we shifted, we expanded the cattle grazing component of it. We'd always done that, but we really stepped up and set up a system with like now adaptive multi-paddock amp grazing is what we would call it, planned grazing. So we have we grow a little bit of winter feed for our cows, but almost everything is in forage and we have many paddocks. So we started to kind of shift using the cattle as a tool to help us also improve the land. At that point in time, we did start really paying attention to soil cover or soil armor, but we hadn't yet started to dig deeper, literally. And that's more of a newer phenomena, as you well know, with the soil health, where we're really starting to investigate what's going on below ground.
Mm. Oh, excellent. So it sounds like you guys have been doing this for quite a long time already. How many years has it been?
Over 30, probably closer to 40.
Oh, wow.
And so our we had a lot of cropland back in the day that we seeded all down to forage. And so that's the length of time that our land has been back in some kind of forage grass.
Oh, interesting. So you had cropland and you decided that it would be better to put it into forage, and that was to have as pasture?
Yes.
Mhm. So tell me what this looks like nowadays. How big are your paddocks? How often do you move? What's the program like?
Interesting that I was just thinking about that. Our there's a lot of variety and diversity in our paddocks, not only with the lay of the land, we're quite mixed, a little bit of hills, some trees, and grass and forbs, but our paddocks are generally about 20 to 40 acres in size, and depending on the size of the herd, because we switch it up whether we're running a cow-calf or we also run yearlings. So we try to be flexible and switch it up so that we're having the different classes of stock in the grazing cell, as well as try to switch up the time that we're in the paddocks. So we're moving every 2 to 3 days on average. We have some small ones that we would only spend a day in. We have some bigger ones that we would spend 5 days to a week in.
Wow.
It does depend on the size of the herd and, of course, the amount of forage as well.
Yeah, everything always has factors like, how much rain you've gotten, um, how hot it is, things like that, and the size of your herd, of course. So things are always changing and you're always adapting to what you have. Um, it's still I'm laughing because I'm really not used to hearing people say we move our cattle more than once a week. It still sounds so foreign to my ears, but it must seem normal to you now because you've been doing it for so long. But thinking back to when you first started it, did it seem like a strange direction to be going because most people weren't doing that and kind of still aren't?
Probably in some ways it was strange. My dad was a really great leader, though, because he was very curious and always wanted to try. He was an innovator. He wouldn't always refer to himself as that, but and so we were always trying different things. From what breed of cattle we were running, and we were always adapting and flexible. So certainly, people. One of the big changes back then, which we completely take for granted now, is I don't know how many miles of fence we have, but most of it, all of the interior fences inside our grazing cells, is single wire electric. And so we are totally used to functioning with an electric fence system. Some of our perimeter fences, because in Lloyd we're very close to Highway 16, so we need to make sure we've got a level of security. But yeah, we're completely used to operating in that way. And most of our moving the cattle will be me going out, driving through or riding through, and then going and opening a gate, and they move into the next paddock, and then I close the gate. It's a bit more challenging when we're calving because, of course, if there's new calves, and so in that case, we'll just leave a gate open because we know it's way better if mom waits a little while and brings her calf with her through the gate.
Yes. So you're even calving out in your planned grazing areas.
Yes.
Your yard.
Yes. Yes. We have calved in May for many years.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you're out on your pastures in May already.
Yes, for sure.
That
Yes.
sounds like
Even earlier. If we can get out in April, we will.
oh, interesting. And you've never found that to be detrimental to like some people might say, oh, some people might say, oh, let it get more of a head start, but that's not really necessary.
I think that is valid in certain situations, Heather, and that would be valid in a continuous grazing situation. But if we stop and are still feeding our cattle and wait until the first paddock is completely, appropriate to turn out on, then what's happened is we still have 40 paddocks ahead of us that get too mature. And also, another important point of that is when we're grazing in April, we're grazing stockpiled forage that grew the previous season.
Oh, okay. Wow. So this is quite a different picture from continuous grazing then. You're out substantially earlier because you've not only saved from the year previous, but also you need to get into your program where you don't let any pastures get too far ahead of you.
Right. They will because there's so many variables, but we try not to. And then another important piece of that, as you get moving, is what you're leaving behind, because that grazing and moving across and depositing the nutrients really encourages regrowth. And especially in this country, end of May and June, we get phenomenal regrowth. So as much as we can get grazed ahead of that, the better.
Ah, okay, because there tends to be more moisture that time of year for you.
It's not only moisture, but it's also daylight hours.
Oh, yes, yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. And what about, so now that makes me think of, I don't know what your area specifically has had, but generally overall, the prairies have really been struggling with drought. Has that been a factor
Yes,
for you as well?
most definitely, most definitely. And so that's where the adaptive piece really comes in. And when we're trying to leave litter, we call it a residual, as well as deposit extra nutrients through bale grazing or some kind of swath grazing or feeding out on the land, that certainly helps to conserve moisture, but it still is a challenge when you're hardly getting any. And so we have really been trying to manage through drought-like conditions with exceptions, because there'll be times in the season when there has been a decent amount of rain and there'll be tremendous regrowth, but trying to manage that. Our um, most limiting factor right now is water supply, and in our paddocks and our pastures, along with the trees and the fair bit of grassland, we're fortunate to have a lot of naturally occurring sloughs and ponds, as well as some dugouts. We have most of our riparian areas fenced out, but a challenge that we've come up to is that all those sloughs and some of the dugouts have dried up. So we have just finished putting in a pasture pipeline to try to get some reliable water.
Yes, yes, I could see that. Yeah, with this many years of drought in a row, that makes sense that you'd have to find a new water source to supply all the paddocks that you've built over the years. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
Looking back on it now that you've been almost 40 years into this type of grazing, if you think back to it and if your family and your ranch had stayed on the continuous grazing idea pathway, what do you think that would contrast to where you are now? Like, what do you think the difference is?
Oh, it's hard to say. It's hard to say, but I suspect we would have been in a model where maybe we were only wintering cows and growing feed here, and they probably would have gone further out for summer grazing.
Hmm.
We're in a pretty heavy cropping, grain farming area. It's good land that we have here. And so we sort of bucked the trend all along where we've kept it in a perennial system.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting then. Yeah. I suppose you might have even had neighbors who maybe question you, going, "Hey, why are you putting that really good cropland into forage?" That must have seemed a bit odd or strange to people who are looking in from the outside.
Totally, totally. One of the pieces I think that was really significant is that in the holistic management model, one of the first things is you figure out about, determine what is your whole under management, but also to really have those conversations about what's important to you and what are you value and what are your visions for the future. And for all of us, it was being in the livestock business. So, of course, from the approach, the regenerative ag approach, and incorporating livestock into your different production systems. I mean, we were already doing that, right?
Hmm.
So it wasn't like we were a complete grain farm and switched to a grazing operation.
Right. Right. Huh. Um, One thing I wanted to ask you about is looking back over all of those years, what would you say were your challenges that you maybe had to overcome? Was it the infrastructure, putting in the fencing? Was it, I guess you had water. Like, what was the hard part of making that change?
Infrastructure would be a piece of it. Um, Fencing wasn't too much because my dad really, really was keen on the MAIG. That was the acronym back then, managed intensive grazing. But I mean, one of the pieces over the years in the cattle business has been the finances and just trying to shift to a lower input operation without compromising revenue. And that's different for everybody. But we put a lot of emphasis on paying attention to the numbers and monitoring it as well, trying to put a financial plan together ahead of time, do that with the grazing as well, and then monitoring it to see where you're going. So certainly when times were tight, if we had switched to cropping, if we had switched to cropping, the financial returns would have been better. But this was the model we wanted to pursue. Yeah, and then with the other consulting work, I like the term coach. I really like. I've had some fabulous mentors in my life, and I really like the idea of giving it back, paying it forward, whatever term you want to use there. And I really love mentoring and learning with other people.
You found something that worked really good on your farm and your ranch and really made your life so enjoyable, and you just want to pass that on to as many people as you can.
Sure. I was telling somebody the other day that the important piece is that we create a viable, we would have used to say sustainable, but now we can say, regenerative operation, but not only that works for us, but also we can share our learnings and continually improve and share that with others as well. And it's not like it hasn't been without its challenges. I mean, other things, you just yesterday talking to a gal about what it was like going through BSE when we were selling, cows for $300 to $400 and how really difficult on top of a drought. So there certainly has been some challenges, but I think the focus or the inclusion of the idea of, really doing some things that are super important to you.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that was because of my dad that we were doing that.
Ah, he was the lead in all of this change.
100%.
And I suppose it's not too much to say that you're very grateful for that leadership.
Oh, beyond, yeah.
Do you think, would you guys ever go back? Would you ever take down fences and make your pastures bigger again? Or
never say never, 100%, because I'm not saying we do that, but I'll tell you a little story for after. But I think the idea, one of the other important pieces of holistic management is every operation is unique. The people are unique. The finances are unique. The production model is unique. And really trying to take the idea of, there's a myriad of tools in our toolbox. Some will be appropriate to our operation this year, and some may not be down the road. So really that's something that I think is important in agriculture, is to look at it through that lens of what can we learn from each other, even though we're making different choices, because it's all contextual. And so that's what I say about succession too, because this is the model that I like running an operation on. That's not to say the next generation is going to. And I think we should be free and open to some of those kind of ideas and not too rigid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You just have to leave the future open for everybody to make their own choices. And you've just done the best with what you knew,
100%. Yeah. That's a Theodore Roosevelt quote that my dad shared a lot. And that one that's do the best with what you have where you are.
Oh, yes. Yes, yes, that's a great quote. Yeah. You said the people side was an epiphany for you. Tell me more about
Yes,
that.
because if you think of a Venn diagram of the three circles,
Mhm,
and so one is for agriculture, land, livestock, equipment.
mhm,
Another one is the finances. And with the holistic management approach, another one is the people.
mhm,
So including that into our management and, paying attention to leadership development, goal setting, strategic planning, team building. Back when we first got involved, people were not doing that in agriculture operations.
oh, okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, we were really talking about the production model and working hard.
Mhm. Oh, okay, the focus just wasn't on your people resources, it was just your farm resources, is that accurate?
Yes, that's very accurate, Heather.
Mm,
And then one of the phrases when we were first learning this was that the human is our most underutilized resource. That's probably so true.
mhm. So then the holistic management, the regenerative practices, including looking at who you had on your farm, would you say then that what you did was you said to each other, "What do we wanna do as a family? Is this the direction we wanted to go?" You all did, and you really focused on who you had on your team as much as you did what you had land and cattle-wise.
Yes, yes. And by 2030, at its very best, what would you like your life and operation to look like? It's certainly something I want to stress is it isn't about perfection, it's about progress. And that will look differently for each and every one of us.
That's right. So do you have, a next generation coming up, behind you yet? How is that
Yes,
a focus
yes,
for you right now?
yes, we do. Yes. And honestly, it feels like it was just the other day that it was my brother and myself sitting across the table from our parents. And now our kids are on the other side of the table. I think that again, one of the things that I value with was having opportunity and support. And so if we can pass that on to our kids, that's one of the most important pieces.
Mm.
What the enterprise looks like, that's going to be up to them. I mean, I know what I would like it to look like, but that's not my choice.
You can't live their life. Yeah, that's right.
No, no. So I think if we can do that, if we can provide some opportunities and support, those are two of the important things. They aren't the only things, but
And, the next generation, do they like the holistic regenerative approach? Are they enjoying that or
yes, yes. Um, because there is also a keen interest in livestock.
Mm,
There's also a keen interest on what we can produce and grow from the land for our own personal health.
mhm,
So and of course, those pieces intersect differently.
mhm. Yes. Yeah, they very much do. Yeah. And, I forgot to ask you about it a little bit earlier, but you had mentioned that you also do bale grazing. I just recently got to go and see some of that, firsthand down at Bigger, Saskatchewan at the
Yes,
such a
yes,
really fantastic experience, and I've seen pictures of bale grazing results, but seeing it in person just really was so incredible because you could just see the mound of grass where the bale had been last winter. And
yes,
just was such
yes,
a stark picture of almost I felt like it was showing how hungry the land is for, that cover and that organic material for the soil to really absorb. Like it's hungry.
yes.
Does that sound like what you're experiencing with that on your farm?
Yes, for sure. When you were referring to some of the practices that we adopted earlier on, that the neighbors thought we were crazy. That's for sure one of them. I mentioned the electric miles and miles of electric fence, but the bale grazing practice was another one that people thought was very unusual. But you just described it very well. It's pretty easy to see the additional amount of growth that happens with that much cover and nutrients.
Mm.
I think there's a tendency in agriculture to talk about gross production and gross dollars, but earlier on, under the financial component of holistic management, we need to be paying attention to net.
Ah, yes.
You can grow the biggest yielding crop or calves or whatever, but we need to be mindful of what is it costing us in a number of ways to do that.
That I have heard in a couple of other interviews before this as well. There's been a couple of ranchers and a couple of agronomists that I've talked to where that was their big focus, was a big part of their picture was minimizing their losses and looking at how producers were paying out in net profit as opposed to yield, and that mindset shift really changed things for them. Would you say that as well for your farm?
Very much so. Very much so. And again, that's going to be different for every operation.
Thank you so much for being on the show, Kelly. If any of our listeners want to get in touch with you, where can they find you? Where can they contact?
I do have a website. It's kellysidoryk.com, KELLYSIDORYK.com, or my email is kelly.sidoryk@gmail.com. And I would invite anybody to reach out and connect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if they were interested in getting some advice for their farm, you're there for it.
For sure. Or just to have a conversation that we can both learn from, because that's what I'm not the expert, but I can help facilitate the conversations that can help put that vision together and a plan to achieve it.
Excellent.
But it's really the individuals and producers that put it together. I can just guide the process.
Well, that's a wrap for this week's episode of Regenerative Farming News. We covered a lot of ground today, from the latest harvest numbers across the prairies to research showing how chemical farming has chipped away at the nutrition of our food, to the powerful reminder that healthier soils mean healthier people. And of course, a huge thank you to my guest, Kelly Sidoryk, for sharing her family's story and her perspective as a holistic management educator. Kelly's journey is proof that farms don't have to fit someone else's mold. They can be shaped around your values, your family, and your goals, and still be resilient and profitable for the next generation. The new Regenerative Farming News website is now up and running. That's where you'll find articles, updates, and more in-depth written content to go along with each episode. It's another way to dig deeper and keep these conversations going. And don't forget to follow Regenerative Farming News on social media. It's the best place to catch updates, behind-the-scenes content, and connect with a growing community of people who care about healthier soils and stronger farms. I'm Heather Heinrichs. Thanks so much for listening. Next week, we'll dive into the importance of diversity in regenerative systems and how mixing things up above ground and below can supercharge your farm. Together, we can grow healthier soil, stronger farms, and a more resilient future.